Manchester is a city of movement. Day and night, its streets pulse with life. Music from clubs spills into alleyways, buses roar past old brick buildings, and crowds stream in and out of pubs, football stadiums, and campuses. But while the surface buzzes with energy, something else churns beneath. Water. Dark. Cold. Unforgiving. The canals of Manchester are everywhere. They cut through the heart of the city, carving narrow corridors between modern buildings and old stone factories. To some, they're beautiful, historic, even romantic. To others, they're dangerous. And to a growing number of families, they've become symbols of something far worse. Loss. Between 2008 and 2018, more than 85 bodies, mostly men, have been pulled from these canals. That's not a typo. 85 in a single city, over just 10 years. Now consider this. Most of the victims were young. Most were in their 20s or 30s. Most had been out drinking or partying before they vanished. Some were students. Some were tourists. Some were locals who simply never made a home. They were found in the water, fully clothed, sometimes with no visible injuries. No clear signs of foul play, just dead. The authorities had a word for it. Accidents. They said the men were drunk, that they slipped, that they fell into the canal and drowned. One time? Maybe. Two. Still possible. But 85? That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. And when people started noticing the pattern, a name emerged. A whisper. A theory too chilling to ignore. They called him the Canal Pusher. A faceless figure. A shadow that prowls the city's towpaths. A predator who waits for the perfect moment. When you're alone, when you're vulnerable, when no one's watching, and then pushes. Just one push. That's all it takes. One shove into ice-cold water. A shock to the body. A scramble in the dark. And silence. The theory gained traction online. First on Reddit, then in local forums. People started mapping the deaths, looking for links, reading between the lines of police reports. Patterns emerged. Consistencies. Similarities. Many of the victims had no history of mental health issues. They weren't known to be reckless. They weren't suicidal. And their bodies often turned up days later, sometimes even weeks. In some cases, miles downstream from where they were last seen, families began to question the official stories. So did journalists. So did the public. The question echoed louder with each new case. Is there a killer in Manchester? If so, he's been hiding in plain sight, striking in the shadows, using the perfect weapon, water. Because water destroys evidence. It removes bruises, washes away DNA. It silences screams. And in Manchester, there's plenty of it. Take a walk through the city at night, and you'll pass countless stretches of canal without railings. No fences, no warnings, just a thin path and a sheer drop into black, icy water. It's picturesque in the daytime. At night, it's a death trap. Now imagine this. You're drunk. It's late. You've lost your friends. Your phone's dead. You take a shortcut along the canal. You hear footsteps behind you. You feel someone following you. You turn around, no one. Then a shove. Then nothing. Your body won't be found for days. The official cause? Accidental drowning. Your parents are told you had too much to drink, that you slipped, that you fell. Case closed. But what if that's not what happened? What if someone was watching you? Waiting? What if Manchester's canals aren't just dangerous, but hunted? Let's go back to the beginning. The deaths started making headlines in the early 2010s. A few here and there. Spread out. Easy to write off. But the numbers kept growing. January 2010, a young man named David Plunkett, 21, is found in Manchester Ship Canal. He'd been out at a music event. His parents say they heard him scream on a call before the phone cut out. April 2011, Tom Casey, 22, disappears after a night out. His body is pulled from the canal days later. Police rule it an accident. March 2012, Nathan Tomlinson, 21, vanishes after leaving a Christmas party. He's found months later in the River Irwell. No signs of trauma. No explanation. Each story followed the same script. Disappearance. Search. Discovery. Drowning. No witnesses. No arrests. Just grief. The numbers reached a breaking point in 2015 when the BBC's Panorama ran a report investigating the theory of a canal serial killer. It introduced the public to a growing wave of fear. They interviewed Professor Craig Jackson, a psychologist at Birmingham City University, who called the deaths highly suspicious. You don't get that many bodies in a short space of time unless something is going on, he said. This isn't normal. The Greater Manchester Police pushed back. Hard. They dismissed the idea of a serial killer. They said there was no evidence linking the deaths, that people were drinking too much, that the canals were simply dangerous. But to families, that wasn't good enough. Because how do you explain how healthy, happy, intelligent young men just vanish, only to turn up dead in water? And why does it keep happening in the same area? The Rochdale Canal, in particular, has been the scene of repeated recoveries. It snakes through the city like a silent witness, brushing past bars, nightclubs, and student areas. If you were a predator, it would be the perfect hunting ground. Low lighting, no cameras, quiet, isolated, and always moving water. The victims don't scream. They don't survive. And if they do, we'll hear about them in Chapter 5. For now, understand this. The streets of Manchester are watched, not by CCTV, not by police, but by the water. Always waiting, always ready to take. And whether you believe in the Canal Pusher or not, the facts remain. Over 85 people have died mysteriously in Manchester's canals in a decade. Most were men between the ages of 18 and 35. Most were found after drinking. Most cases remain unresolved. The police deny any connection. The public isn't so sure. Some call it an urban legend. Others call it a cover-up. But when families bury their sons with no answers, and when bodies keep surfacing without explanation, the legend becomes something more. A question, a warning, a fear. Because in Manchester, the water has a habit of pulling people under. And maybe, just maybe, something else is helping it. Patterns. That's how every major serial killer has been caught. Patterns of behavior. Patterns of location. Patterns of death. Sometimes you don't find the killer by what he leaves behind. You find him by what keeps happening. Again, and again, and again. That's what made Manchester's canal deaths impossible to ignore. These weren't random disappearances. They weren't spaced out across time and place. They clustered around weekends, around nightlife districts, around the same bodies of water. It was almost systematic. Let's go back. January 2010, David Plunkett, 21, attends a music event at Trafford, calls his parents. He's panicked, disoriented. Then the line cuts. 10 days later, he's found in the canal. No head trauma, no injuries, no water in his lungs, no definitive cause of death. April 2011, Tom Casey, 22, leaves a bar with friends. They lose track of him. He's discovered days later, floating in the canal near Castlefield. Police say he likely slipped. His family disagrees. He was an experienced swimmer, confident, clear-headed, sober enough to walk. March 2012, Nathan Tomlinson, 21, disappears after leaving a Christmas party. CCTV shows him walking along the canal, alone. His body isn't found until 3 months later. By then, any evidence is gone. Cause of death? Drowning. But he had bruises on his face. Theories swirled. February 2013. Nathan's mother receives a disturbing anonymous call. A man tells her, "Your son didn't drown. He was murdered." The call is traced, but the number is unregistered. The man is never found. Coincidence? For men, all in their early 20s, all disappeared after nights out. All found in the water. All with no clear explanation. Let's keep going. September 2013, Shovik Pal, 18, a student from India, disappears on New Year's Eve. CCTV shows him being ejected from a club near Old Trafford. No coat, no phone, no wallet, just a teenager in freezing weather. His body is discovered in the Bridgewater Canal 3 weeks later. Police say he drowned, but CCTV shows him walking in a straight line, no signs of intoxication. No reason to fall. April 2014, Nick Turner, 27, leaves a bar in Deansgate Locks. Doesn't make it home. Found 3 days later in the canal. Friends say he was completely fine before he left. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't emotional. Just gone. November 2015, Charlie Pope, 19, a student at the University of Manchester, goes out with friends, leaves a bar, tells a friend he's walking back. His phone dies. He disappears. His body is found hours later in the Rochdale Canal. That's not an accident. That's a routine. This isn't just happening once a year. It's happening several times a year, in the same zones, with the same demographic. In fact, an unofficial map created by internet sleuths shows a disturbing concentration of bodies around the Rochdale Canal, the Ashton Canal, and the Bridgewater Canal. These 3 routes run directly through Manchester's busiest nightlife districts. If you're looking for drunk, distracted, isolated victims, this is your hunting ground. And the pattern deepens. Almost all the men were alone. Almost all were last seen walking near the canals. Almost none of them were caught on camera at the moment of disappearance. That's a red flag. In a city wired with CCTV, how does no one vanish in front of a lens? Unless someone's waiting in the blind spots, unless someone knows where the cameras are and where they aren't. This is where the Canal Pusher theory comes alive. Because this killer, if he exists, isn't flashy. He's not flamboyant. He doesn't torture. He doesn't leave messages. He doesn't want attention. He just wants to kill. And he wants to do it quietly. He doesn't chase you down. He waits. He watches. He picks the right moment and gives you a nudge, a push, into water that's cold enough to induce hypothermia in minutes. And that's what makes this theory terrifying. Because it's not dramatic. It's efficient. You don't need weapons. You don't need a getaway car. All you need is timing and a body of water. The canal does the rest. It drowns you. It pulls you away. It hides the bruises. It washes away skin cells, blood, fibers, fingerprints. And by the time someone finds you, there's nothing left to investigate. Just another name, another photo, another body pulled from the same dark stretch of water. Over time, the public started to notice. The term Canal Pusher was coined online. First in whispers, then in headlines. Forums lit up with theories. Reddit threads exploded. People began to share their own close calls, their own brushes with something sinister. Some said they'd been followed along the canal. Some said they'd heard footsteps behind them, then seen no one. Some claimed to have been pushed and survived. We'll get to them soon. But even before survivor testimonies, something was already clear. This was no longer just a string of accidents. It was a mystery, one no one wanted to officially admit. The Manchester Evening News published multiple pieces on the canal death epidemic. Families begged for reinvestigations. Campaigns were launched to install more CCTV lighting and railings near the canal paths. Authorities agreed, eventually, to increase safety measures. But they continued to deny any foul play. They stood by the statistics. People fall into canals, especially at night, especially when drunk. But there's a difference between statistical probability and deliberate targeting. And the more people died, the harder it became to accept that this was all just bad luck. Because bad luck doesn't kill 85 people in 10 years. Bad luck doesn't stalk the same neighborhoods. Bad luck doesn't vanish your son without a trace, then spit him back out 3 days later, dead, without a mark on him. This isn't bad luck. It's something else. And deep down, everyone in Manchester started to feel it. At night, the canals didn't feel quiet anymore. They felt watched. The towpaths didn't feel peaceful. They felt predatory, because the pattern was there, and someone or something was using it. The next chapter, it explores how the whispers became a storm, how the phrase Canal Pusher went from online myth to very real, very terrifying theory, and how the deaths kept coming. Even as the city tried to look away, it didn't start with a scream. It started with a murmur, a whisper between friends, a strange feeling at the back of the neck, a headline that felt too familiar, another body found in the canal, Another son who never made it home. At first, Manchester didn't pay attention. People die in cities. Drunk people fall. It's tragic, but it happens. That's what everyone said. That's what the police insisted. But by 2013, the numbers became too sharp to ignore. Too specific. Too deliberate. Not just random drunks. Not just tragic accidents. And then came the whisper. There's someone pushing the man. It sounded insane. A tabloid headline waiting to happen. A citywide panic born of paranoia. But paranoia often has roots. Something feeding it, fueling it. And the fuel came fast. Because every time Manchester relaxed, every time it began to forget, another man vanished. And another body surfaced. It wasn't just families who noticed. It was everyone. Bar owners, students, night shift workers, taxi drivers, ambulance crews. Something felt off. The rumors began to spread like damp through old brick. It was 2014 when the name started circulating publicly. Not in police briefings. Not in newspapers. Online. Reddit. Facebook. Mancunian message boards. The Canal Pusher. At first, it sounded like something out of an urban legend. A ghost story for university students. A boogeyman for drunk partygoers. But urban legends don't come with body counts. And the Canal Pusher did. The theory: a single individual was targeting young men late at night, particularly in the Dean's Gate locks and Castlefield areas, and pushing them into canals. No robbery. No assault. Just a push. Clean. Quiet. Lethal. He didn't need to be strong. He didn't need a weapon. Just timing. And your back turned. The theory had just enough logic to spread. Because think about it. The average city canal is about 6 to 8 feet wide, lined with slick stone and brick. No guardrails, no lights. At night, with alcohol in your system and the wind cutting through your coat, one wrong step can be fatal. Now, imagine someone helps you make that step. You're gone in seconds. One Reddit user posted in early 2014. I was walking home from a night out. Took the canal path like I always do. Heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, no one was there. When I kept walking, I felt something graze the back of my coat. I spun around again. Nothing. I ran the rest of the way home. Don't use that path anymore. Another wrote, friend of mine nearly went into the Rochdale Canal last week. Says he was walking and felt two hands on his back. Managed to catch himself on the edge. No one around when he turned. Cops didn't take him seriously. These posts didn't go viral. Not yet. But they kept coming. Dozens. Then hundreds. People claiming to have felt watched. People claiming to have been pushed. People who never reported it, because who would believe them? But the stories kept multiplying. Then came BBC's Panorama in 2015. They aired a segment titled, Manchester's Canal Deaths, Accident or Murder? That's when things exploded. The episode focused on the growing number of bodies found in and around Manchester's canals, questioning whether these deaths were really accidental. They interviewed grieving parents, local criminologists, and even mentioned the Canal Pusher theory by name. Dr. Craig Jackson, professor of psychology at Birmingham City University, appeared on the show. He didn't mince words. 85 bodies in 10 years? That's a statistical anomaly. Something is happening here. Whether it's a serial killer or not, these deaths aren't just chance. And they aren't all explained. That episode ignited a firestorm. Suddenly, Manchester wasn't whispering anymore. It was watching. Students stopped using canal paths at night. Some pubs and clubs issued warnings to customers leaving late. Taxi drivers began advising passengers to avoid shortcuts by the water. Tourists asked hotel staff about the guy pushing people into canals. The police, however, weren't convinced. They doubled down. Greater Manchester police insisted there was no evidence of a serial killer. No links, no suspects, just dangerous conditions and alcohol. They said the Canal Pusher was a myth, a media creation, a public panic. But the public didn't buy it, because too many families had heard too many things that didn't add up. Let's talk about David Plunkett again. His parents said they heard their son scream in real time. He was on the phone with them the night he disappeared. 1 second he was talking, the next second screaming, then silence. He wasn't found for 10 days. No injuries, no drugs, no explanation. The coroner ruled it accidental. His parents never accepted it, and they weren't alone. Shovikpal's father, Santanu, begged the police to re-examine the CCTV footage. He said his son would never have walked into water voluntarily, that he was clear-headed, smart, cautious, that something happened to him out there. They said it was an accident, but the families kept asking, why no struggle? Why no defensive wounds? Why no signs of fear? And if it was just a fall, why always near the same canal bends? Why the same time of night? Why the same demographic? Even the locations had patterns. Dean Gate Locks, Castlefield Basin, Rochdale Canal near Canal Street. All areas surrounded by bars, clubs, and narrow, unlit paths. High risk, high traffic, high opportunity. Still, the Canal Pusher theory had skeptics. Some said it was mass hysteria, a city traumatized by loss and looking for meaning in tragedy. Some pointed out that cities like Birmingham and London also had canal deaths, and that when alcohol is involved, accidents happen. But that's the thing. Accidents have variety. This didn't. This had a profile. That's what made it so chilling. The more you looked, the more it fit. And if there really was someone out there, a man in the shadows, stalking the towpaths, nudging his victims into silence, then Manchester wasn't dealing with myth. It was dealing with the perfect serial killer. One who didn't leave fingerprints. One who didn't need to bury the bodies. One who let the canal do the cleanup. And he wasn't getting caught. Because how do you catch a killer who uses the city itself as a weapon? Not a knife, not a gun, but water. Dark, cold, erasing. By 2016, the Canal Pusher wasn't just a theory. He was folklore, a figure whispered about in pubs and clubs. The reason bouncers told people not to walk alone. The name muttered when another headline appeared. Body found in canal near city center. No suspects, no witnesses, no answers, just the same silence. And through that silence, the whisper continues. He's still out there. Most of the Canal Pusher's supposed victims never got the chance to speak. They disappeared silently, were found days, sometimes weeks later. Their mouths closed, their lungs full of water, their stories untold. But not all of them. Some lived, and what they described was not an accident. These survivors are the cracks in the official narrative, the ones who made it out of the water, or avoided going in altogether. They're not in police reports, not in headlines, but they're out there, online, in forums, in whispers. Let's start with Tommy, a university student whose account was posted anonymously in 2015 under a now deleted Reddit username. I was walking back to my flat along the Rochdale Canal. It was around 2 a.m., and I'd left the club early because I felt sick. I wasn't drunk. I was tired, but fine. The towpath was empty. I didn't hear anything until I felt it. A hard shove between my shoulder blades. I stumbled forward, almost lost my balance. I spun around. No one. The path behind me was empty. I swear on my life, I felt hands. I felt pressure, but there was no one there. He reported it to the police. They told him he probably tripped, or imagined it. Maybe he brushed against a railing. There were no cameras, no proof, just his word. But Tommy wasn't alone. In 2016, Emma Reynolds, a bartender working late at a Deansgate pub, gave a statement to Manchester Confidential, an independent online outlet. She said, "I was locking up around 1:30 a.m. I had to take the canal path to get to my car. It's faster than walking around. I've done it for years. That night, I heard footsteps behind me, quick, deliberate. I turned around and saw this guy in a dark hoodie just standing there, watching. Not moving, not saying anything. I called out, but he didn't respond. I turned back and walked faster. Heard the footsteps again, closer this time. I bolted. I didn't look back. Got in my car, locked the doors. When I looked back, he was gone. Just vanished." Her hands shook during the interview. She wasn't joking. What shook her more than the encounter was what she heard the next morning. A body had been pulled from the same stretch of canal. She never took that route again. Still think it's all in their heads? Let's talk about Dan Klein, a 29-year-old warehouse worker from Salford. Dan gave his account to the BBC during their Panorama investigation. He was walking home after a night shift, sober, focused, a routine route along the Ashen Canal near Ancoats. Then this happened. I felt a push, like full force. I hit the wall and nearly lost my balance. Turned around ready to swing. No one. I'm talking a clear stretch of towpath. No trees. No alcoves. I ran. And I don't scare easy, mate. But I ran. Dan didn't fall into the water. But others did. Mark, a bartender from Chorlton, did go in. His story comes from a 2017 blog post titled "The Canal Nearly Took Me," written under pseudonym. It's raw, unfiltered. You can still find it archived. He writes, "It was my mate's birthday. We were out in spinning fields. I wasn't drunk, but enough to feel the cold. Took the canal route back because it's faster. I heard running footsteps behind me. Turned, saw nothing. Then bang, something hit my lower back hard. I fell. Into the canal. Water cold like needles. Panic hit instantly. I fought to stay above the surface. Somehow dragged myself to the edge and pulled up. My phone was gone. My wallet too. But I swear there was no splash after mine. Nothing. Just silence. And then footsteps running off. He went to the hospital for hypothermia. Told police someone pushed him. They said he must have slipped. That there was no evidence of an attack. Mark doesn't agree, and neither do the rest of us. Because let's talk about patterns again. These survivor accounts all include the same key details. A shove from behind. No attacker in sight afterward. Empty canal paths at night. Footsteps. Silence. Disappearance. And the overwhelming feeling of being watched. Too many similarities. Too much detail. And too much consistency to chalk up to alcohol-induced confusion. So the question becomes, why aren't these cases being taken more seriously? Why aren't more of these people interviewed, protected, or believed? One possible answer is liability. If Manchester police or the city council acknowledge the possibility of an active serial killer stalking the canals, it creates mass panic. And worse, legal accountability. They'd have to explain why there weren't more cameras, why there weren't better barriers, why these patterns weren't flagged sooner. But some investigators have started to look deeper. Retired Detective Steve Baldwin, formerly of Greater Manchester Police, told The Guardian in a 2018 interview, if even one of these men was murdered, then there's a killer who's gone undetected for years. The problem is, the evidence doesn't survive. By the time the bodies are recovered, the water has washed everything away. It's the perfect crime scene. The perfect dump site. But too many families are saying the same thing. Their sons weren't drunk. They weren't suicidal. They were just gone. Asterisk. And when you combine the survivor accounts with that timeline, it becomes more than a theory. It becomes a shadow. Because these aren't stories from one source. Or 1 year. These are stories from 2010 to 2023, told by people who never met, who live in different neighborhoods, who had no reason to lie. There's even video. In 2019, a local student named Rachel uploaded a now-deleted TikTok claiming she recorded audio of someone screaming along the canal towpath near the gay village. She was walking home, recording voice notes. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream. No context, no shouting, just a single scream, cut off midway. The post was removed within hours, but not before it got 60,000 views. The caption read, "I don't know what this was, but I heard a splash right after, and then nothing, just nothing." The scream hasn't been traced. The splash wasn't investigated, because, just like the rest, it couldn't be proven. And that's the killer's greatest weapon. Anonymity. You can't investigate what you can't prove. You can't stop what you can't catch. You can't catch what you can't see. This isn't a killer who leaves notes, or taunts the press, or calls the police with riddles. This is someone who kills with timing. Someone who doesn't need chaos. Just darkness. And a little push. Some even say it's not one person. What if it's more than one? A group. A network. A sick game passed from person to person. What if the Canal Pusher isn't a single shadow, but many? That's what makes it all the more terrifying. Because if it's one man, you might catch him. But if it's anyone, if it's someone you walk past every night, how do you stop that? The bodies kept turning up, month after month, year after year. Dozens of young men, most of them under 30, pulled lifeless from Manchester's canal system. The pattern was disturbing, the deaths unexplained, and yet no one was arrested. No one was even a suspect. Why? Because time and again, the investigations into these canal deaths hit the same wall. Lack of evidence, lack of urgency, lack of answers. Let's go back to the beginning. Between 2008 and 2014, over 60 bodies were recovered from the canals of Greater Manchester. That's an average of nearly 10 per year. Most of them male, most of them alone, most of them found near nightlife zones, spinning fields, Dean's Gate, Ancoats, the gay village. You'd think this would trigger red flags. A task force, a crackdown. Instead, what did the police do? They called it a coincidence. In public statements, Greater Manchester Police, GMP, repeatedly insisted there was no evidence of foul play, no signs of a serial killer, no reason to believe the deaths were anything other than tragic accidents. Here's what one official said in 2016: "Our investigations have found no pattern to suggest a single individual or group is responsible. Most of these deaths can be attributed to alcohol-related misadventure." That word again, misadventure. It became the default verdict, the stamp used at inquests, a polite way of saying, this was a freak accident. Move along. But behind the scenes, families weren't buying it. Like the parents of Shovik Pal, a bright 18-year-old engineering student from India, Shovik disappeared on New Year's Eve 2012 after being escorted out of a nightclub by security. He was later found dead in the Bridgewater Canal. CCTV showed him walking near the canal, then gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no visible injuries, but Shovik had been missing for 3 weeks. His father pleaded with police to look deeper. He said, "My son was not drunk. He was not depressed. Something happened to him, and I want the truth." The inquest ruled it accidental drowning. Case closed. Then came David Plunkett, 21 years old. Disappeared after attending a music event in Trafford Park in April 2004. He never came home. His body was later found in the Manchester Ship Canal. Here's the disturbing part. His parents were on the phone with him when he vanished. They reported hearing screaming and gurgling before the line went dead. They rushed to the police. And still, the death was ruled accidental. David's father, Mike Plunkett, told BBC Panorama, "We were literally listening to our son dying. There was no help, no proper investigation. We knew something was wrong, but the system didn't listen." Even more baffling, David's blood alcohol level was 0. Let that sink in. A young man found in the canal. No alcohol in his system. Clearly terrified in his final moments. But his case was swept under the same label, misadventure. Let's pause here. How can authorities claim alcohol is the common thread when some victims had none in their system? Why did CCTV footage disappear in some of these cases? Why were the scenes treated as potential crime scenes? In the 2017 death of Luke, a 23-year-old student from Leeds visiting friends in Manchester, CCTV captured him walking near the canal, looking over his shoulder repeatedly, as if he was being followed. The next day, his body was pulled from the water. No suspects, no investigation, just the same old line. It was late. He was drunk. He must have fallen. But the footage says otherwise. This is the silent epidemic of these deaths. The assumption that any young man near water at night must be drunk, that they're disposable, unworthy of deeper scrutiny. It's not just a police problem. It's a systemic failure. Inquests, which are supposed to provide transparency and closure, often lasted mere hours. Family members were sometimes not even allowed to present alternate theories or challenge the findings. In one case, the coroner cut off a mother mid-testimony, saying, "We are not here to speculate about murder theories." But isn't that what justice is built on? Investigating all possibilities? Instead, these hearings became rituals. A rubber stamp, another tally on the board. This widespread institutional apathy led independent journalists to take matters into their own hands. One of them was Duncan Campbell, a former crime correspondent for The Guardian. He spent years digging into the pattern of canal deaths. He found something chilling. Many of the deaths happened in nearly identical circumstances. Victims last seen near clubs or bars, late at night, often between 1 and 3 a.m., alone, often separated from friends, their phones missing or water damaged, found in similar locations, under bridges, near narrow sections of canal. But there was no central database, no coordinated review. Each case was treated in isolation, each one written off as a fluke. Campbell wrote, "If you scatter puzzle pieces across a room, you might miss the picture. But when you bring them together, the outline of something deeply sinister starts to emerge." He wasn't alone. Professor Craig Jackson, a criminologist at Birmingham City University, also weighed in. He said, "The frequency of these drownings is highly irregular. Other UK cities with similar canal systems, Birmingham, Leeds, London, don't see the same rates. That should alarm people." But it didn't. At least not the people in charge. There were no public safety campaigns, no new lighting, no added patrols, no surveillance upgrades. Even after survivor stories started surfacing, even after the Panorama documentary aired, GMP remained silent. The city council issued a brief statement. "We understand the public concern, but we encourage people to act responsibly around open water, particularly when under the influence of alcohol. Blame the victims. Shift the responsibility. Case after case. Death after death. No closer to answers. No attempt to connect the dots." Even the National Crime Agency, which was urged to review the data, declined to open a national-level inquiry. They claimed it was not within their jurisdiction. It's as if the perfect killer had found the perfect camouflage. Bureaucracy. And the families? They were left with grief, questions, and the haunting feeling that someone out there got away with murder multiple times. Let's not forget the cold numbers. 85-plus bodies since 2008. Dozens of them young men under 30. Most within walking distance of clubs and bars. Nearly all cases closed without further inquiry. Compare that to other cities. Birmingham, 3 canal-related deaths per year on average. London, 5 to 6. Manchester, 10 to 12 consistently. Still a coincidence? Or something darker? There are now calls for an independent review of all water-related deaths in Manchester from the past 15 years. But without pressure from media or the public, those calls fall on deaf ears. The truth is buried somewhere at the bottom of those canals, along with evidence, along with accountability. And the deeper you dive, the clearer the picture becomes. Something has gone terribly wrong in Manchester. Manchester is a city of energy, pubs brimming with students, clubs beating with music until dawn, street performers outside the Arndale, Instagrammable alleys in the northern quarter. It's England's second city, a symbol of regeneration. Once industrial and soot-stained, now sleek, modern, and proud. But beneath that shine, something lingers. A cold, murky shadow. Unspoken, unacknowledged, bodies in the canal. And no one seems to want to talk about them. Not the council, not the police, not the nightlife industry, not even the local media. At least, not until public pressure forces it. But why? Why the silence? Because silence is safe. Silence protects the brand. Manchester has spent the last 2 decades rebuilding its image. From the gritty heart of the Industrial Revolution to a cosmopolitan, digital, modern capital. A hub for finance, fashion, tech, and nightlife. You can't sell a city by talking about drownings, especially not ones that hint at murder. So, slowly Manchester's shiny new identity took shape, one that couldn't afford to be stained by mystery. Let's look at some numbers. In 2022 alone, Manchester welcomed 1.6 million international visitors. Nightlife is one of its biggest attractions. From the canal street bars of the gay village to the warehouse clubs of Dean's Gate locks. The city made £9.8 billion in tourism and hospitality revenue that year. Now imagine the headlines. Serial killer in Manchester's nightlife district? young men targeted by Canal Pusher near bars and clubs? It would crush tourism, and city officials know it, which is why, when whispers of the Canal Pusher began to surface around 2015, they were met with rapid, blunt denials. The Greater Manchester Police issued a flat statement. We have found no evidence to support the existence of a serial killer. Case closed. The local council echoed the same message. There is no cause for alarm. These deaths are not linked. It was almost coordinated, like a press release. A campaign to calm, not to question. But for the families left behind, it felt like gaslighting. Take Michael Simpson, whose 24-year-old brother Tom was found dead in the canal in 2018. Tom had been out with friends. He left the bar alone to get food. Never came back. Michael told reporters there were no signs of struggle. No robbery. His phone was missing. His wallet still had cash. But the case was closed after a 30-minute inquest. The coroner didn't want to hear anything beyond he fell in. That's what they all want to believe. He tried reaching out to the city council. No reply. He contacted the police to ask if Tom's case could be reviewed. The officer said, "Sorry, but we've seen this before. It's tragic, but it's not suspicious." Not suspicious? Young men vanishing without reason. Found dead. Over and over. Yet no push for answers. Because suspicion threatens the illusion of safety. And safety sells. Think of Manchester's marketing. World-class nightlife. Safest student city in the UK. A place to live, work, and play. This is what universities sell to foreign students. What real estate companies pitch to tech workers. What tourism boards shout to Instagrammers and influencers. It's a fragile ecosystem, built not on truth but reputation. So anything that disrupts the story gets buried. And that includes tragedy. There's a term for this in crisis communication, reputation management. It's when institutions downplay negative events to preserve their image. It's why police forces are slow to admit internal failures. Why councils bury reports. Why newspapers sometimes look the other way. In Manchester, the silence around canal deaths is reputation management. Let's talk about the media for a moment. Yes, a few brave journalists have raised alarms. The Manchester Evening News did publish stories. BBC's Panorama aired a segment in 2018 that rattled the public. But most of the time, the coverage stops at the headlines. Body found in canal, no suspicious circumstances. That line again, no suspicious circumstances. It's used so often, it might as well be a slogan. You'll see it on police tweets, on news websites, in the mouths of spokespeople. But what does it really mean? It means, don't panic. Don't ask questions. Don't expect follow-up. It's a public relations band-aid. But families aren't fooled. Take the story of Ali Shah, a 26-year-old medical student from Birmingham. He was in Manchester for a job interview. He went for a drink alone. Never came back. When his body was recovered from the Rochdale Canal, it had injuries inconsistent with a fall. His family requested a second postmortem. It was denied. They offered to pay for it. Still denied. They filed a complaint against the coroner. Dismissed. Ali's uncle Rashid told ITV News, "We're not conspiracy theorists. We're just a family who lost someone. And we're being told to stop asking questions. That makes no sense, unless someone is afraid of the answers." This fear of truth is everywhere, even among survivors. Yes, some people survived encounters near the canal. One man, who asked to remain anonymous, described being followed after leaving a bar near Canal Street. "He was just behind me. I crossed the bridge. He crossed too. I picked up my pace. So did he. I turned around and he ducked, like he didn't want to be seen." The man bolted, made it home. Did he report it? He tried, but the officer at the desk laughed. "Sounds like you had too much to drink, mate. Go home." Dismissal, derision, denial. But denial doesn't make reality disappear, because people kept dying. And slowly, the public started whispering again. Online forums lit up. Posts titled, "Another body in the canal today. Canal Pusher strikes again. Why won't Manchester investigate this?" Some of these threads were shut down, moderated for speculation. called disrespectful. But the question stayed, is there a killer? Or is Manchester too proud to admit one might exist? The truth is, we don't know. But what we do know is this. A pattern exists, a disturbing one. And Manchester doesn't want to see it. The city that prides itself on innovation, progress, and openness has shut its eyes to the one thing that matters most. Justice. For the families. For the victims. For the young men whose lives ended in dark, freezing water. Without closure, without answers. And until someone dares to speak, truly speak, the city will remain silent. Because denial is easier than accountability. If there really is a Canal Pusher, someone lurking in the shadows, waiting, watching, striking when the streets are empty and the bars begin to close, then someone must have seen him, felt him, escaped him, and they have. They're out there. Whispers in forums, fragments in podcasts, anonymous confessions to journalists. They are the ones who survived, and their stories are as terrifying as they are eerily consistent. Let's begin with Adam, 27, a software engineer. He lived in Manchester in 2017 and spent most weekends drinking around Deansgate. He never expected anything strange, until one cold night in November. I'd had maybe 3 pints, not hammered, not even tipsy. I left the pub around 11:45 p.m., took my usual shortcut by the canal. I was texting my girlfriend, not really paying attention, until I felt someone right behind me. Like too close. I turned around and this guy was just standing there, maybe 10 feet back, hood up, staring, not moving, just watching. Adam quickened his pace. So did the stranger. When I picked up speed, so did he. It felt like he was herding me toward the water. I had to cross this narrow bridge, and something in me just screamed, "Run." So I did. I ran straight off the path and into the road, flagged a taxi, didn't even care where it was going. He never reported it. Why? Because I knew what they'd say. That I was drunk, paranoid, or making it up. He didn't know it then, but dozens of people across Manchester have described near-identical encounters. Sophie, a bartender who worked late-night shifts on Canal Street, had her own brush with the shadow. It was 2020. She was locking up after 2 a.m., walking the short route along the canal to her bus stop. I saw him standing by the water, just standing. His hands were in his pockets. He didn't move, didn't speak. As I walked past, he took one step toward me. I crossed the street instantly. I don't know why, but my body just panicked. She turned around. He was gone. She didn't see him move, didn't hear a sound, just gone. I never walked that route again. Ever. Then there's Liam, 23 at the time, who wasn't so lucky. He did end up in the water. I was celebrating my mate's birthday. We'd been out drinking, yeah, I'd had a few. But I remember everything. I remember leaving the club. I remember walking past the canal. And I remember a shove. Not a slip, not a misstep. A shove. It was hard. Sudden. From behind. I hit the water, and it was pitch black and freezing. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't see the surface. I thought I was going to die. But Liam was strong. He swam to the edge, clinging to metal piping until a passerby pulled him out. The man who'd pushed him? Gone. Police were called. They took a statement. But within hours, the incident was labeled. Accidental fall, no foul play suspected. Liam was stunned. They didn't believe me. Or they didn't want to. I said I was pushed, that someone tried to kill me. And they said, "Are you sure you didn't just trip?" He knows what happened. And he's not alone. A local Reddit thread titled, "I was almost pushed into the canal last night," gained traction in 2021. The poster, a university student named Ben, wrote, "Was walking home from the Printworks area, passed a man in a long coat. He stepped aside to let me pass, then as I moved by, he lunged sideways like he was going to shove me in. I jumped away and ran. Didn't look back." Dozens of comments poured in. Same thing happened to me last December. Thought I imagined it. Now, I'm not so sure. There's something not right near those canals. Yet for every survivor who speaks up, many others stay silent. Why? Fear. Fear of not being believed. Fear of sounding crazy. fear of reliving the terror, and perhaps most of all, fear that no one will do anything. Because Manchester authorities have shown a clear pattern. Denial first, dismissal second. Dr. Louise Hall, a criminologist at Salford University, has studied serial offender behavior for over a decade. She believes survivor stories hold untapped power. In cases like this, when deaths are unexplained and law enforcement is hesitant to label them homicides, survivor testimony becomes crucial. It's often the only evidence that can indicate a pattern. She points out a disturbing consistency. The incidents happen late, at night, near water, often close to clubs or bars. The victims are overwhelmingly male between 18 to 30, and the attacker? Always behind, always silent, always vanishing. That's predatory behavior, Dr. Hall says. And if enough people are reporting similar experiences independently, that's a red flag. A big one. But officials rarely interview these survivors. There's no task force, no public hotline, no coordinated effort to gather testimony, which means the stories remain scattered, hidden in threads, podcasts, and late-night bar whispers. Some, though, have started to organize. A grassroots group called Canal Watch emerged in 2023. Formed by locals, students, and families affected by the deaths, the group started collecting accounts from people who felt they had been followed, targeted, or pushed near the canals. They hold monthly community meetings, share stories, map sightings, pressure the city council, and most importantly, they listen. According to Canal Watch founder Maya Thomas, listening is what police have refused to do. We don't claim to have all the answers, but we know when people feel unsafe. And what we're hearing again and again is the same. They felt hunted. One woman described being grabbed. Another described a man waiting at the same spot for 3 consecutive nights. None of this is proof, but it is pattern. Maya continues, if 5 women said a man stalked them near the same alley, would we call it coincidence? No, we'd call it a threat. So, why are we ignoring it when it's young men by the water? Because society doesn't expect men to be victims. That's the ugly truth beneath the silence. Men are supposed to handle themselves, to drink hard, fight back, walk it off. But predators exploit that expectation. They rely on it. And when those men vanish, it's easier for the public to assume they were careless, drunk, reckless. Instead of targeted, survivors know better. They remember the shadow behind them, the feeling of breath on their neck, the splash of freezing water, the silence that followed. They remember everything. And now, some are finally speaking out. The city might not want to listen, but we must, because their stories may be the only trail we have. The Canal Pusher, if real, isn't a ghost. He's a man, a human, a predator operating in plain sight. And somewhere in these survivor accounts lies a piece of the truth, the clue that might finally blow the lid off this entire mystery. We've heard the whispers, seen the headlines, listened to the survivors, but it's not enough to hear their stories. We need to understand them. We need to map them. Because if these incidents, deaths, disappearances, near misses are all linked by more than coincidence, then there's a pattern, a design, and patterns point to predators. Let's begin with the bodies. Since 2008, Greater Manchester has seen a troubling number of young men found dead in or near canals, at least 85 deaths by some counts. And while authorities insist there's no evidence of foul play, a closer look reveals disturbing consistencies. Let's consider a sample cluster, the Printworks Triangle. This is a small zone in the city, bordered by the Printworks Entertainment Complex, the Deansgate Locks, and the Rochdale Canal. Within this area alone, over a dozen deaths have occurred between 2008 and 2022. Most victims were men aged 18 to 30, last seen leaving a bar or club, went missing alone, were found in the water days later, had little to no signs of trauma, had phones and wallets intact. Now, let's zoom in further. Case 1. Nathan Tomlinson, 2011, age 21, last seen leaving a Christmas party at Palace Hotel. Body found, River Irwell, weeks later. Official cause, drowning. But here's the catch. Nathan's phone and coat were never recovered. CCTV footage showed him walking near the canal, looking agitated. His mother insists Nathan was afraid of being followed that night. She believes he didn't fall. He ran. From someone. Case 2. David Plunkett, 2004. Yes, older, but eerily familiar. Age, 21. Last seen leaving a music event at the Royal Armouries. Body found, Manchester Ship Canal, 10 days later. Cause of death, drowning. But here's the twist. His final phone call to his parents, recorded, captured screaming in the background. And then silence. Police dismissed it, claimed David was drunk and fell in. But how do you explain the screaming? Case 3. Shovik Pal, 2012. Age 18. International student. Last seen outside Warehouse Project nightclub on New Year's Eve. Body found, Bridgewater Canal, 3 weeks later. Police concluded accidental drowning. Except he was escorted out of the club and never made it home. CCTV showed him walking near the canal. But what happened after? No footage, no witnesses, no answers. These aren't isolated tragedies. They form a chilling sequence. And what about the timing? Many of the canal-related deaths occur in the early hours of Saturday or Sunday between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m. That's when clubs close, when streets thin out, when people stumble home, vulnerable, disoriented, and when predators strike. The modus operandi, if there's one, is remarkably consistent. Young male targeted, seen walking alone, near canal path. No overt struggle or signs of attack. Body discovered downstream days later. Now, mix in the survivor accounts from Chapter 7. Do you see the same pattern? Liam, pushed from behind, no warning. Adam, followed along the same canal path. Sophie, stalked silently from the water's edge. Ben, almost shoved into the canal after midnight. Different names. Same setup. Even Dr. Louise Hall, the criminologist we heard from earlier, emphasizes how predators often repeat behavioral patterns, especially when they believe no one's watching. Killers who stalk in urban spaces tend to create comfort zones, geographic areas they're familiar with, where they feel confident escaping detection. The canals offer a near-perfect environment for this. And what do Manchester's canals offer? Obscurity, dimly lit narrow pathways, escape routes, dozens of side alleys, bridges, staircases, noise cover, rushing water, urban bustle, lack of surveillance, spotty CCTV coverage at best, a disposal method, cold, fast-moving water that erases evidence. These aren't accidents waiting to happen. They're opportunities waiting to be seized. There's even a seasonal trend. More disappearances and deaths occur in the winter months between November and March. Why? Because it's darker, colder, fewer people linger outside, and a man falling into freezing water at 3 a.m. won't scream for long. And this brings us to one of the most unsettling revelations yet. There is no formal public database linking these cases. No interdepartmental task force. No criminal profiling team assigned. That means no official attempt to cross-reference. Timelines, geographic proximity, behavioral patterns, victimology. In short, no attempt to connect the dots. But private citizens have tried. Independent researchers, Reddit users, podcasters, and even local journalists have attempted to piece together timelines and locations. One such citizen, a retired crime scene investigator who goes by the alias Redfish, spent 2 years mapping deaths near Manchester's waterways. His map shows concentrated clusters along key stretches of canal, especially where they intersect with popular nightlife spots. Redfish's conclusion? There's a pattern here. Maybe not proof, but too much repetition to ignore. The water's hiding a predator, and no one's looking for him. He believes the deaths that occurred within a certain radius of the Deansgate locks are most suspicious. He even compiled a victim profile template. Male, aged 18 to 30, intoxicated or lightly buzzed, last seen alone, disappears within walking distance of water, found days later, usually drowned, no defensive wounds, no theft involved. This isn't just a profile, it's a blueprint for murder. And yet, without formal investigation, the blueprint remains ignored. The Greater Manchester Police, GMP, continue to repeat the same statement. There is no evidence to suggest a serial killer is operating in Manchester. But how would they know? They're not connecting the dots. They're not building timelines. They're not even interviewing survivors. Let's ask a simple question. If a known predator were operating under this pattern, what would it take to stop them? A witness? There have been many. A failed attempt? There are survivors. Public outcry? Canal Watch and other groups have been sounding alarms for years. So, why the silence? Because acknowledging a predator means admitting failure. Failure to protect. Failure to investigate. Failure to act. And maybe, just maybe, admitting a serial killer has been stalking Manchester for over a decade would shatter public trust. But we're not here for comfort. We're here for truth. And when we lay the data out like this, victims, timelines, geography, survivor testimony, the coincidences become fewer. The patterns become clearer. The questions become impossible to ignore. This isn't just an urban legend. It's a statistical anomaly bordering on criminal negligence. Somewhere in those shadows, along the water's edge, someone has been hunting. And every time we fail to connect the dots, he gets to keep going. Unseen. Unnoticed. Free. There's a strange thing that happens when a mystery grows too big. It stops being a crime and becomes a legend. That's exactly what happened to the Canal Pusher. Somewhere along the line between real deaths and suspicious disappearances, survivor accounts, and whispered rumors, the Canal Pusher morphed from a possible serial killer into an urban myth. But was that by design? Let's start with the media. The first time the name appeared, it was 2015, when the Daily Star ran a headline that changed everything. The Canal Pusher, serial killer dumping drunken men in Manchester waterways? That was the first time the press gave the mystery a name. A villain. A hook. And people paid attention. Twitter erupted. Reddit threads exploded. Facebook pages formed overnight. True crime podcasts and YouTube channels began speculating. And suddenly, the Canal Pusher wasn't just a disturbing theory, it was viral. But instead of sparking a deeper investigation, this attention created something else. Mockery. Soon, more respectable outlets dismissed it as a conspiracy theory. The Guardian called it urban paranoia. BBC News aired a short segment in 2016 quoting GMP officials who waved off any suggestion of a serial killer. Manchester Evening News referred to the Canal Pusher as a social media fiction. The tone shifted from curiosity to skepticism to ridicule. And just like that, the mystery was no longer a potential public safety crisis. It was a meme, a joke, something for late-night pub debates and Halloween costume ideas. But behind the laughs, people were still dying. Manufactured doubt. This shift in tone wasn't just natural, it was strategic. There's a pattern in the way institutions deal with uncomfortable truths. They use 3 tactics: downplay the data, discredit the messengers, distract the public. Let's break that down. 1. Downplay the data. The Greater Manchester Police have continuously stated the majority of deaths in or near canals involve alcohol. There is no evidence to suggest foul play. But remember the survivor accounts. The missing CCTV footage, the lack of proper autopsies or toxicology reports. If you don't look for a killer, you won't find one. That's not an investigation. That's an avoidance strategy. 2. Discredit the messengers. When local activists and citizen investigators began mapping cases, the media labeled them armchair sleuths and conspiracy theorists. People like Redfish, the retired crime scene analyst we heard about earlier, were laughed off in public forums. Why? Because if the messenger looks crazy, no one listens to the message. 3. Distract the public. The Canal Pusher became the perfect distraction, a cartoon villain. Social media was filled with jokes. The Pusher strikes again, memes, doctored images of trench-coated shadows lurking by canals, even a mock Twitter account pretending to be the Pusher himself. When crime becomes entertainment, the real horror vanishes. The story is no longer about the victims. It's about the narrative. And this narrative, it serves one purpose: control. If the public sees the Canal Pusher as an urban myth, they don't demand answers. They don't pressure the police. They don't ask the hard questions, because it's easier to believe in a legend than to accept a systemic failure. The role of true crime media. Ironically, while mainstream outlets ridiculed the theory, true crime content creators kept the story alive. Podcasters, YouTubers, TikTok creators, Reddit sleuths, they dug deeper, interviewed families, found patterns, tracked cases the police wouldn't even list. One notable example, The Missing Files, a podcast that ran a 3-part special titled The Shadow by the Water. It featured interviews with survivors who were never contacted by police, families of victims who believe the cause of death was misclassified, a former police detective who, off the record, admitted there are too many coincidences to ignore. Their final statement? The Canal Pusher might not be one man. It could be several. It could be no one. But something sinister is happening along those waterways, and someone's covering it up. That's the dual-edged sword of digital media. It can amplify nonsense, but it can also resurrect buried truth. And sometimes the people closest to the mystery are the ones least believed. The families left behind. Time and time again, grieving families have asked the same question. Why won't the police look deeper? Some have even hired private investigators. Nathan Tomlinson's mother, for example, publicly accused the police of ignoring key pieces of evidence, like CCTV footage she discovered herself. They said he was drunk, that he fell in. But his coat was missing. His phone never turned up. He was terrified before he vanished. Why won't anyone listen? Shovik Powell's father begged for a broader investigation, especially given that his son was escorted out of a club and vanished moments later. No answers, no arrests, no justice. The grief is compounded by something worse than silence, dismissal. When families are told their sons just slipped in, despite glaring red flags, it doesn't just deny them closure, it gaslights them. And over time, that gaslighting becomes part of the myth. The legend of the drunk young man who vanished near the canal. Another tragic, but forgettable, statistic. Fear and the city's reputation. There's another reason authorities may be reluctant to admit something darker is at play. Reputation. Manchester has spent years transforming its image, from post-industrial gray to modern, youthful, vibrant. A city of nightlife, music, football, and culture. A tourism hub, admitting that a potential serial killer or even a predator network is preying on young men could destroy that image. It could devastate the hospitality sector, trigger international headlines, cause panic. Better to let people believe in accidents, to trust the current, to keep walking along the canals, never looking over their shoulder. In this way, image becomes more important than truth. And that's where myths serve the system. Because if something horrific sounds unbelievable, the system never has to believe it. But what if it's not a myth? Here's the question we must now confront, head on. What if the Canal Pusher is real? Not as a cartoon villain, not as a meme, but as a man. A man who learned to exploit a system that doesn't ask questions. A man who knows the routes, the blind spots, the CCTV gaps. A man who understands just how much we want to believe in coincidence, because the truth is too frightening to face. And if he's not real, why haven't the police ruled it out definitively? Why haven't they done the following? Launched a formal canal death task force, publicly released full toxicology reports, reviewed all available CCTV, interviewed survivors as part of a pattern investigation, created a unified victim profile map. Because they haven't. And that silence, that inaction, it's what gives the Canal Pusher real or not, his power. Myth or monster? In the end, we're left with two possibilities. There is a serial predator operating in Manchester, preying on intoxicated young men, and using the canals as his weapon and graveyard. There isn't. And what we're seeing is a perfect storm of urban risk factors, tragic accidents, and sensational media noise. But there's also a third possibility, one more sinister. What if there was a killer and the system let him walk free? To preserve its image, to avoid panic, to protect itself. Because in many true crime stories, the cover-up isn't just about hiding the killer. It's about hiding the truth. The deeper you dig into the Canal Pusher mystery, the stranger it gets. You start with facts, bodies, timelines, CCTV gaps. Then come the patterns, similar victims, eerily consistent circumstances. And finally, the theories. At first glance, it feels like urban myth. But when you stack up the evidence, when you stop dismissing and start listening, one chilling truth becomes impossible to ignore. Someone is behind this. But who? In this chapter, we explore the leading theories. From lone predator to predator networks. From mentally unstable vigilantes to something even darker, organized silence. Let's break them down. Theory 1, the classic serial killer. This is the simplest and most terrifying theory. That there's one man, one monster, someone who stalks Manchester's canals by night, targeting young, vulnerable men. A predator who knows the city's blind spots, who understands the flow of crowds, the choke points, the dead zones. A British equivalent of the smiley face killer theory in the US. Here's what lends this theory weight. Victim profile. Almost all victims are young, fit, and male. Most are white, between 18 and 30. Many are students or recent grads. All were last seen alone, intoxicated, and near nightlife districts. Location specificity. The deaths cluster around the same few canal zones, particularly near Dean's Gate Locks, Castlefield, and Ancoats. It's as if someone knows where to strike and where to disappear. Timing. Most deaths occur between midnight and 4 a.m., the dead zone between partying and sunrise, when CCTV is sparser, when streets empty, when reaction times slow. Criminal profilers suggest that if the Canal Pusher is real, he's likely male, age 30 to 50, highly familiar with Manchester's canal system, possibly ex-military, homeless, or a local who blends in, possibly mentally unstable but methodical. Some believe he may live rough, sleeping in derelict buildings, under bridges, in tunnels. One investigator described him like this: "He's the ghost of Manchester. He doesn't exist during the day, but when the streets go quiet, he comes alive." But here's the catch: no one's ever seen him clearly. Which brings us to Theory 2. Theory 2, the shadow network. What if the Canal Pusher isn't one man? What if he's many? This theory, whispered in corners of Reddit, Discord, and fringe forums, suggests a predator ring possibly organized through encrypted messaging or dark web channels. Here's what gives this theory legs. The deaths span a decade. It would be hard for one person to operate undetected that long unless he was incredibly disciplined or had help. Survivor reports vary. Some survivors describe being followed. Others report being chased. A few recall being confronted by two men, not one. Overlap with human trafficking routes. Manchester is one node on the UK's trafficking map. Could these drownings be cover for disappearances gone wrong? One chilling Reddit post from 2018 claimed, "You think it's one guy. It's not. They take turns. They send videos. They call it the push. Sometimes they record it." That post was deleted within hours. The user account? Gone. True. Maybe not. But disturbing? Definitely. And if multiple people are involved, that would explain how the deaths continue with no single pattern, just enough variation to avoid detection. Theory 3. Opportunistic attacker. Not all serial predators kill with planning. Some wait for the right moment. They blend into the crowd. Then they strike. The opportunist theory suggests the pusher isn't hunting in a traditional sense. He's just watching. Night after night. Waiting for a lone, drunken target to stagger past a railing near a canal. Then, without a sound, he shoves. That's it. One shove. No need for a weapon. No cleanup. No evidence. Some criminologists suggest this type of killer gets a psychological thrill from the act itself. The simplicity. The rush. He doesn't want to interact. Doesn't want to kidnap. He wants one thing: control over the moment of death. If this theory holds, he may not even realize how many he's killed. He may just keep walking as the canal goes still. Theory 4. The mentally ill loner. Some believe the Canal Pusher is not a killer in the traditional sense, but someone suffering from untreated mental illness, paranoia, delusions, rage. Perhaps he sees his victims as threats or sinners, or part of some imagined conspiracy. These types of attackers often don't fit the serial killer mold. They may kill sporadically based on triggers, voices, visions, or internal crises. In one 2016 case, a man was arrested after attempting to push two strangers into the Rochdale Canal. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and institutionalized. Could there be others like him still free? Theory 5, no killer at all, just chaos. Then there's the skeptic's answer. There is no pusher. There's just bad luck, bad planning, and alcohol. This theory claims drunken people fall into canals all the time. Water plus winter equals death from cold shock. CCTV doesn't cover everything. Manchester's canal infrastructure is outdated and dangerous. In this version, the killer is a combination of bad design and risky behavior. No mystery, no monster, just tragic accidents. But here's the problem. This theory doesn't explain the patterns. It doesn't explain why so many victims were healthy swimmers. It doesn't explain the missing phones, wallets, and jackets. It doesn't explain survivor accounts of being followed. And it certainly doesn't explain why the deaths stopped, then started again like someone hitting pause and play. Chaos rarely behaves with such consistency. The elephant in the room, law enforcement silence. Regardless of which theory you believe, one thing stands out: the refusal to investigate seriously. If the police had truly ruled out foul play, they'd have conducted a unified review of all canal deaths, compiled a behavioral profile, launched a public awareness campaign, increased patrols and CCTV around hotspots. They didn't. Instead, we have silence. And silence breeds suspicion. Some theorists even believe the killer could be connected, a former officer, someone with access, someone protected. Far-fetched? Maybe. But in true crime history, it wouldn't be the first time. Remember Dennis Rader, the BTK killer? A church leader, a compliance officer. Or Stephen Port, the UK serial killer who murdered for men? He was almost dismissed as harmless until families forced a deeper look. Sometimes the monster hides in plain sight, closing in on the truth. As we close this chapter, one question lingers. What kind of person kills silently and walks away unseen? Whether it's a lone predator, a shadowy group, or a psychotic drifter, the result is the same. Young men are dying and no one is answering for it. The scariest part isn't just the deaths. It's that the killer, if he exists, may be reading this. He may be watching the news, tracking the stories, laughing at the Reddit threads. Because the longer we debate theories, the more time he has to plan his next move. For over a decade, young men have vanished into Manchester's canals. The number is staggering, the circumstances suspicious, and yet the response? Muted, dismissive, minimal. There have been no citywide investigations, no public inquiries, no task force. So you have to ask the question no one wants to answer. Is someone covering this up? And if so, why? Let's pull back the curtain on the forces that might be hiding the truth. Whether from fear, pride, money, or guilt, Manchester may be harboring more than just a killer. It may be harboring a secret, the silence of the Greater Manchester Police. Start with the basics. By 2018, over 85 bodies had been pulled from Manchester's canals. Despite the striking similarities, Greater Manchester Police, GMP, insisted there was no connection, no pattern, no foul play. Case after case was ruled accidental drowning, often within days. Autopsies were rushed. Inquests were brief. Families were left with more questions than answers. It became routine. Body found, labeled an accident. Media loses interest, case closed. But why? Retired detectives have offered a chilling possibility. If the Canal Pusher is real, then GMP has failed to stop a serial killer for years. Admitting that now would be an institutional disaster. It would shatter public trust, spark lawsuits from victims' families, expose negligence across multiple departments, trigger media frenzy and international scrutiny. So instead of opening Pandora's box, GMP closed the files, one by one. This isn't unprecedented. We've seen it before, most notably in the Stephen Port case. Case study, the Stephen Port failure. Between 2014 and 2015, 4 young men were drugged and murdered by Stephen Port in London. Each body was found in the same area, yet the Metropolitan Police treated each death as unrelated. Families begged officers to investigate deeper. They were ignored. Only after intense public pressure and an independent inquiry did the truth emerge. Systemic failure, apathy, and a stunning lack of curiosity. If it happened in London, could it be happening in Manchester? Absolutely. Media muzzling and narrative control. Now shift focus to the media. Local outlets like the Manchester Evening News have occasionally run pieces on canal deaths, but often under headlines like, "Tragic drowning of student after night out. Man's body pulled from canal, no suspicious circumstances." The language is always careful, controlled, soothing. But ask yourself, why? Why aren't these deaths getting national attention? Why aren't they front-page stories? The answer may lie in narrative protection. Manchester is one of the UK's fastest-growing cities. A tech hub, a tourist destination, a nightlife capital. Bad press, especially involving a possible serial killer, would be catastrophic. It would affect tourism revenue, university enrollments, nightlife economy, housing and development projects. A serial killer on the loose doesn't fit the city's branding. So, the theory goes like this. Media outlets tied by funding, favors, or fear avoid stirring the pot. Instead of asking hard questions, they toe the line. It's just bad luck. Be careful near the water. Nothing to see here. And if a journalist digs too deep, the story vanishes. Reddit users have cataloged multiple blog posts and articles on the Canal Pusher that mysteriously disappeared or were taken offline. Coincidence? Or censorship? Political paralysis and institutional ego. Manchester's leadership has also been strangely quiet. Despite mounting pressure, the city council has made no formal motion to investigate the deaths. No push for an independent review. No commission, no inquiry, no accountability. Why? Because admitting there's a serial killer, or even the possibility of one, would trigger political fallout. It would raise uncomfortable questions. Why weren't more safety measures implemented after the first 20 deaths? Why were so many cases closed prematurely? Why wasn't the public warned? And most damning of all, was this preventable? No, one wants to be the politician who admits, we knew something was wrong, but we did nothing. So the safer route is denial, minimize, deflect, delay. Call it bureaucracy, call it cowardice. Either way, the result is the same. Nothing changes. The accidental safety crisis. Let's talk about infrastructure. Manchester's canal system is historic, beautiful, and dangerously outdated. Narrow paths, weak railings, poor lighting, blind curves. For a city that sees thousands of clubgoers and students walking home late at night, often drunk, it's a recipe for disaster. After the first wave of drownings, some expected change. Maybe higher fencing, surveillance upgrades, more emergency ladders, public awareness signs. But years later, most of those improvements remain limited or non-existent. Why? Because canal deaths are bad for business. You can't build riverside luxury flats next to signs warning about drowning risks. You can't market canal-side nightlife if every bridge is fenced like a prison. So instead of fixing the problem, the city pretended it didn't exist, suppressing families, silencing grief. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this cover-up narrative is what happens to the families. Time after time, grieving parents, siblings, and partners have asked police, "Please look again." He wasn't suicidal. He was terrified of water. Something's not right. And each time the answer is the same. It was just an accident. End of conversation. One mother of a 22-year-old student who died near Dean's Gate Lock said, "The police told us they were sorry, but they had other priorities. They said these things just happen. But our son was a strong swimmer. He had no history of depression. His wallet was gone. His phone too. How is that nothing?" Another parent was warned not to go to the press, that doing so might interfere with police operations. But there were no operations, No investigation, just a quiet burial. You start to see a pattern, and it's chilling. The cost of telling the truth. So, if the cover-up theory is true, what's the motive? In one word, damage control. No city wants to admit it's unsafe. No police force wants to admit it missed a predator. No institution wants to admit it failed the people it swore to protect. So the easiest path forward is denial. Pretend it's a myth, a conspiracy, a coincidence. Let time bury the outrage. Let the dead become statistics. But here's the thing about truth. It doesn't stay buried forever. And eventually, someone will dig deep enough to expose it. Echoes from other cities. This wouldn't be the first time authorities failed to act. Think of Peter Sutcliffe. The Yorkshire Ripper police ignored key witness reports and dismissed sex worker deaths for years. The killer murdered 13 women before being caught. Harold Shipman, a GP who killed over 200 patients. The system protected him for years because of his status. Stephen Port. Police refused to connect identical deaths. The families did the work for them. In each case, the truth only came out after public outrage. The same could be true for the Canal Pusher. Unless people demand answers, real answers, this cycle of silence will continue. The final question. So, here we are, more than a decade in. Dozens dead. Still no suspect. No charges. No accountability. And still, every few months, another body. Same story. Same denials. You can call it a mystery. You can call it a myth. But if this is a cover-up, then the real question is, how many more will die before someone finally breaks the silence? Because the longer this secret stays buried, the more powerful it becomes. The dead can't talk, but the living, they remember everything. In the darkness of Manchester's canal paths, a few people have been pushed, but survived. Their accounts are fragmented, terrified, but disturbingly consistent. They felt it. A presence. A shove. A moment between life and death. And then cold water, confusion, and the will to live. These survivors don't just believe in the Canal Pusher. They've met him. A near death in Deansgate. It was February 2018, around 2:30 a.m., when Tommy Barrett, a 21-year-old construction apprentice, was walking alone near Deansgate locks. He'd been out with friends, but left early after an argument. His mates thought he'd caught a cab. He hadn't. Tommy decided to walk home. It wasn't far, just along the towpath. He liked the water, found it peaceful. But that night, the canal wasn't peaceful. It was watching him. I remember the air going still, he says, like everything froze. He was near a curve in the path when he heard it, footsteps. Fast, close. He turned. No one. But then a hard shove between his shoulders. Straight into the canal. I hit the water and panicked. My phone and wallet flew out my pockets. I was thrashing. I don't know how I didn't black out. He managed to grab a submerged ladder, pulled himself out, dripping and shaking. He looked around. Empty. Not a soul in sight. He reported it to the police the next day. They said he'd probably slipped. Case closed. Pushed in silence. Lena Armstrong never wanted her story public. She's 29, a data analyst, and insists she's not the type to believe in serial killers. But what happened to her in March 2015 near Castlefield Basin changed everything. She'd just finished a late shift. She walked the canal path home, as she often did. She wasn't drunk. She wasn't distracted. She wasn't lost. She was alert. That's why she heard it, the faint sound of footsteps matching hers. She slowed. They slowed. She sped up. They did too. She turned. Nothing. Then, just as she neared a sharp bend with low railing, she felt a hard grip on her upper back. A push. She screamed and instinctively grabbed the rail, dangling over the icy black canal. Whoever it was, they just ran. I couldn't see them, but I know someone tried to kill me. She pulled herself back onto the path, scraped and breathless. When she told police, they said it was probably her imagination. Maybe the wind. She stopped using the canal path after that. She also started carrying pepper spray. A commuter's terror. Ryan James, 34, had just left a late gig in Spinningfields in 2016. He was walking near the canal, barely lit, mostly empty. He was texting his wife when it happened. I didn't hear anything. I just felt it bam. Something slammed into my back. I hit the water face first. Ryan was lucky. A barge owner nearby heard the splash. He helped pull Ryan out. Wet, shivering, bleeding from the temple. His attacker? Gone. He never got a good look. Just remembered a hooded figure running off into the shadows. The barge owner later said he'd seen similar incidents. People pushed, attacked, then written off as drunks. It's always men, he told Ryan. Always at night. Always by themselves. Ryan went to the police. They took his statement. Nothing ever came of it. Patterns in the chaos. The survivors come from different backgrounds, different neighborhoods, different times of day, but their experiences are eerily similar. Always walking alone, always near a bend or a blind spot, always near poorly lit sections of canal, always pushed, never mugged, never spoken to, and never seen clearly who did it. Some remember gloved hands. Some recall a shadow behind them. Some don't remember the push, only the cold and the panic. One thing unites them all: they were dismissed. By police, by friends, even by the press. A few were even mocked online, accused of seeking attention. But the trauma stayed, and for many the guilt too, because they survived. I don't think I was supposed to live. Javier Paredes was visiting Manchester from Spain in 2019. He was staying with his cousin, a student at the University of Manchester. After a night out in the northern quarter, Javier decided to walk back alone around 1 a.m. He followed Google Maps along the canal. I remember feeling someone close behind. I stopped. They stopped. It was weird. He turned around, ready to confront the person. Then a hard push. But he stumbled sideways, catching the railing. He didn't fall in. The man behind him ran. Fast. Vanished into the night. He didn't say anything. He just tried to end me. That's how it felt. Javier went home shaken. He didn't report it. He was leaving the next day. But his cousin later told him about the Canal Pusher myth. That's when it clicked. It wasn't a myth. I met him. Social media, the archive of fear. While police claim there's no Canal Pusher, the internet tells a different story. Reddit, Facebook, and Twitter are littered with posts from people who say they were followed near the canal, spooked by footsteps, pushed and managed to climb out, or found someone watching them silently in the dark. Most never filed reports. They didn't think anyone would believe them, but they remember, and those memories now live online. One Reddit user wrote, "I was walking back from Dean's Gate, half sober, when I saw a guy just standing still near the water. I waved. He didn't move. I kept walking, and next thing I knew, I heard running behind me. I turned and he stopped. Then he walked the other way." Another, "I was pushed into the Rochdale Canal in 2020. No one believes me because I was drinking, but I didn't trip. I felt hands." These are not isolated posts. There are dozens, possibly more. It's an underground archive of terror, ignored by authorities, preserved by strangers. Survivors unite. In recent years, some survivors have connected through Facebook groups, anonymous forums, even underground meetings in pubs and cafes. They share stories, compare timelines, study maps. They've begun piecing together their own investigation because no one else will. One member, who asked not to be named, said, "We believe there's a pattern. We believe it's not just one man. It could be two, or more. It feels organized." Another chilling theory. But when survivors compare notes, the data starts to align. Same locations, same times, same methods. Someone or some group is out there, and they don't want to be seen. What the police say. GMP has repeatedly denied any link between the survivors' stories. They say there's no forensic evidence of foul play. Survivors are likely confused or mistaken. Most incidents involve intoxicated individuals. Social media mythologizes what are really unfortunate accidents. But ask the survivors? They're not confused. They know what happened to them. They've lived with the fear, the nightmares, the silence. And every time they see another body pulled from the canal, they wonder, why not me? The power of the testimony. There's something powerful in hearing survivors speak. It strips away the abstract. It makes the horror real. This isn't about legends or headlines. This is about people. People who were walking home. People who were just trying to get from A to B. People who never asked to be part of a mystery. And yet they are. And their voices might be the only proof we have that the Canal Pusher isn't just real, but still out there, watching, waiting. Time doesn't lie. It's the one thing that can't be twisted by conspiracy, fear, or denial. Dates, times, names, they're all we have. In the case of the Canal Pusher, the timeline is more than just a list of tragedies. It's a pattern, a chilling calendar of death spanning over a decade. Victims with no known connection, all found dead, all drowned, all discovered in or near Manchester's 10-mile canal network. This chapter walks us through that deadly timeline, victim by victim. And by the end, you might start to see what the authorities won't. December 2010, Nathan Tomlinson, age 21. It begins with Nathan, a criminology student, healthy, happy, no known mental health issues. Nathan was out celebrating with colleagues at a Christmas party. He left the Mitre Hotel around 11 p.m. He was captured briefly on CCTV, then vanished. 3 months later, his body was found in the River Irwell. His phone, coat, and ID were missing. The pathologist couldn't determine an exact cause of death, just consistent with drowning. But here's what stood out. His shoes were tied. His pants weren't disheveled. No signs of a struggle. No alcohol in toxicology. And yet he never made it home. Case, accidental death. February 2011, David Plunkett, age 21. David attended a music event at the Barton Arms, just west of Manchester. He drank, danced, and around 1 a.m. made a panic call to his parents. They described the call as horrific. Screaming, gasping, then silence. Days later, David was pulled from the Manchester Ship Canal. Authorities found alcohol in his system, double the legal driving limit. They ruled it an accident, but no one could explain the terror in his voice that night. His parents insisted. David didn't fall. Something happened. Case, accidental death. March 2012, Shovik Pal, age 18. This one made headlines. An international student from India, Shovik went missing after a New Year's Eve party at the Warehouse Project in Trafford. He was seen leaving the venue with a man police never identified. 22 days later, his body was found in the Bridgewater Canal. Again, no injuries, no clear explanation, just water in the lungs. The CCTV gap in his timeline remains unexplained. Case, drowning. Non-suspicious. June 2013, student from Salford University. Unnamed in media reports, this young man was found dead in the Rochdale Canal near Castlefield Basin. He had been missing for several days. He had minor injuries, but the cause of death was recorded as drowning. No signs of robbery. No signs of struggle. Case, accidental. November 2013, 3 bodies in 1 week. That's when people started paying attention. In one 7-day span, Manchester pulled 3 bodies from different points of the canal. None of the men knew each other. All were in their 20s or 30s. All were found fully clothed. All were missing for days before being discovered. Police said the timing was a tragic coincidence. Locals weren't convinced. Online forums lit up. That's when the term Canal Pusher began circulating. January 2014, murder of Nathan Winstanley, age 19. Nathan's case was different. He wasn't drowned. He was stabbed to death, but his body was left near a canal. Authorities said it was a domestic matter, but some locals pointed out the killer fled via the towpath, disappeared into the same area where other victims vanished. An outlier or a warning? March 2014, the month of fear. In March 2014 alone, 4 separate bodies were recovered from the canals around Manchester. All were adult males. 3 had been reported missing days before. 1 had no known ties to the area. The local coroner issued a statement. There's no reason to believe there is any link between these deaths. But journalists started digging. They found a 13-month stretch from mid-2013 to early 2014, where 16 bodies were recovered. 16, in just over a year, all from canals. All men. Case statuses? Accidental. 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 July 2015, GM police admit. 61 bodies since 2008. Under pressure, Greater Manchester Police finally released a figure. Since 2008, 61 bodies had been pulled from the city's waterways. 61. They insisted there was no serial killer, no foul play, that the numbers aligned with other major cities. But an anonymous detective told the Daily Star, "It's extremely odd. A lot of these men weren't drunk. Many were locals, and most were found in spots where you don't just fall in." That statement was never confirmed officially, but the public noticed, and the fear grew. 2016 to 2019 silent years? Strangely, media coverage of new canal deaths slowed between 2016 and 2019. Some attributed this to less reporting by local outlets, police downplaying stories, a shift in search algorithms burying the topic, but several bodies still surfaced during this time. At least 6 were reported in the Manchester Evening News, all young men, all from canal areas, all ruled non-suspicious. The survivors we heard from in Chapter 12, most of them were attacked in this time period, which raises the question, was the Canal Pusher becoming more careful? 2020 to 2023, the resurgence. In 2021, a 28-year-old man named Martin Douglas was pulled from the River Irwell. He'd last been seen outside a pub, alone, texting, and walking near the canal. His friends said he was sober. CCTV showed no struggle, no injuries. He simply vanished. Weeks later, in 2022, a student named Leon Jacobs was found drowned in the Bridgewater Canal. His last text read, "There's someone following me. Think I'm being paranoid." That message was sent at 1:17 a.m. He was found 2 days later. No suspect. No further investigation. Case accidental. 2024, the tipping point. In early 2024, a local freelance journalist began mapping the deaths. The visual was horrifying. Dozens of red pins littered a digital map of Manchester's canals. Clusters around Deansgate, around Castlefield, around the Northern Quarter, all eerily close to dark towpaths, blind bends, and broken CCTV coverage. She tried to publish the story in a regional paper. It was spiked. The editor said, "Too speculative. We're not feeding myths." But the map leaked online. It went viral on Reddit, Twitter, and in true crime spaces. The timeline, once scattered and fragmented, was now a clear visual body count. People could see it, and once they did, they couldn't unsee it. The common thread. Looking at the full timeline, patterns begin to crystallize. The victims are almost exclusively male, aged 18 to 35. Most are found fully clothed, with wallets, phones, and valuables still intact. The locations? Repetitive. Same canal bends. Same time windows. 0 convictions. Not one case of homicide linked to any of the deaths. If it was accidental, it's the most statistically unlikely streak of coincidences in UK history. If it was suicide, why always the same demographic, same methods, same places? If it was a serial killer, then they've been killing undetected for over a decade. A killer in time? Let's run the math. 60-plus bodies. Over 15 years. That's 4 deaths per year. All in canals. All in one city. There's no official suspect. No arrests. No closure. Just a trail of waterlogged bodies and grieving families. And still, the question haunts Manchester like fog rising from the water. Is this coincidence? Or is it the work of a predator who's been here all along? Watching? Waiting? Timing it just right? Every good mystery splits the room. For every voice warning of a serial killer in the shadows, there's another waving it off. A skeptic, a critic, a so-called rationalist. They call a myth, a conspiracy. Internet hysteria. And when the Canal Pusher theory started to gain traction, those voices got louder, especially from official channels. But dig deeper, and you'll see The louder the denial, the more suspicious things begin to look. Let's unpack that. There is no evidence. Greater Manchester Police. That's been the consistent line from law enforcement. Over the years, Greater Manchester Police, GMP, have released multiple statements about the deaths in the canals. They acknowledge the number is high, but not extraordinary. There is no evidence to suggest foul play. One spokesperson said in 2015, there is no serial killer. Another said in 2020, all cases have been investigated and closed. But survivors have reported being pushed. CCTV has captured figures lurking behind victims. Families have described their loved ones as sober, happy, and unlikely to fall in. Yet none of these stories ever seem to change the official tune. Which begs the question, why the blanket denial? Is it bureaucracy, PR control, or something darker? Fear of a moral panic. The UK has a history with urban legends spiraling out of control. Think the Black Monk of Pontefract or the London Underground ghost stories. Authorities often downplay theories like the Canal Pusher to avoid mass hysteria. And from a public relations standpoint, it makes sense. Imagine the headlines. Serial killer stalks Manchester's canals, authorities knew for years. That's a political nightmare. It implies failure, liability, fear. So instead, they manage the message. Downplay, deny, reframe. It's alcohol-related. The canal edges are dangerous. It's tragic but explainable. But here's the thing. If it was just about public panic, wouldn't you at least investigate the pattern behind the scenes? Instead, it seems like the pattern itself is ignored. Academic pushback the psychology of pattern recognition. Skeptics from academia have been quick to jump in. A 2017 paper from the University of Manchester argued that the Canal Pusher myth was the result of cognitive bias, our brain's tendency to find patterns where none exist. They claimed people are more likely to remember a story if it fits a narrative of danger. Social media amplifies isolated incidents into trends. The idea of a hidden killer is more compelling than the reality of accidents. All of that is true on paper. But even if we account for cognitive bias, how do you explain 60-plus deaths in the same small area? Multiple eyewitnesses describing pushes or chases. Repeated failures in CCTV tracking at the time of disappearances? At what point does coincidence become statistical impossibility? Censorship or oversight? Let's talk about journalism. Multiple regional reporters have claimed their Canal Pusher stories were heavily edited or outright pulled. One freelance writer told Vice that his editor at a national paper wouldn't run a piece connecting the dots between recent drownings. The reason? It would make the police look incompetent. Another journalist said their publication feared being sued for defamation, despite naming no suspects. So, instead of pushing the story, they buried it. The only place the theory survived? Reddit threads, TikTok accounts, independent YouTube documentaries. In other words, the people took over. And that, perhaps more than anything, is what drew the ire of officials. The misinformation label. As social media interest exploded, fact-checkers began flagging Canal Pusher content as misleading or unverified. Even videos with victim timelines and citations from public news sources were throttled or demonetized. This sparked outrage. Creators argued, "We're just presenting facts the public can see. This is journalism." Platforms replied, "You're pushing conspiracy." But here's the catch. If dozens of official death certificates list unexplained drowning, and bodies keep showing up, what exactly is being misrepresented? The truth? Or the fact that no one wants to deal with it? Who benefits from silence? That's the heart of it, isn't it? Why bury a possible serial killer story? Let's follow the incentives. Police departments avoid scrutiny, lawsuits, and funding cuts. City officials protect Manchester's reputation as a growing tourist and cultural hub. University recruiters don't want prospective students scared off by stories of young men vanishing near campus. Local businesses along the Canal District thrive on nightlife and foot traffic. If the Canal Pusher exists and it became official, it would be economically catastrophic. Bars would lose customers. Parents would pull their kids from uni. The city would gain a new reputation. Manchester stalked by a killer. So the easiest solution? Pretend it's not happening. Even victims' families silenced. In 2015, the family of Nathan Tomlinson tried to reopen his case. They requested an independent inquiry after inconsistencies in the police report. They were denied. In 2017, the parents of David Plunkett attempted to submit new audio evidence, his final terrified phone call. Police refused to reclassify the case. One mother spoke anonymously to the press. They don't want to admit it. If they admit one was a murder, they have to look at all of them. And that terrifies them. She's right. Acknowledging one case means opening dozens more. What about the survivors? In Chapter 12, we heard from survivors. Men who were pushed, chased, or woke up in the water with no memory of how they got there. Their stories were never formally linked to the drowning cases. Why? Because once someone survives, their case becomes harder to dismiss. There's a voice, a witness, a testimony, and yet many survivors say the police showed little interest in follow-up. One even said his incident report went missing. If true, this isn't incompetence. It's active erasure. The public awakens. Despite official pushback, the public has begun organizing. Reddit boards now track new deaths. Twitter threads compare timelines. TikTok creators map where bodies were found. It's crowdsourced vigilance. Grassroots sleuthing in the absence of formal investigation. And maybe that's what terrifies the powers that be most of all, the idea that the people can investigate, connect, and expose what the institutions won't. Because at this point we have to ask, what's more dangerous, a serial killer stalking the canals, or a system that refuses to even look? The denial is the cover-up. To believe the Canal Pusher theory, you don't need proof of a suspect. You just need to see that something is wrong, and no one wants to fix it. That's a cover-up. Whether intentional or not, the consistent pattern of denial, dismissal, and censorship forms its own shadow, one that hangs over Manchester like the fog rolling off the water. A chilling reminder. Sometimes, it's not the crime that's hidden. It's the truth. Manchester, a city of music, movement, and momentum. But under its bright lights and pulsing nightlife, something lurks in the dark. Something ancient, quiet, relentless. The canals, carved into the city's veins, don't just carry water. They carry death. Over 60 young men, found dead in or near the waterways, most dismissed as accidents, all left behind grieving families and unanswered questions. And through it all, one chilling whisper has refused to fade. The Canal Pusher. Is it an urban legend? A collective delusion? Or is there truly a killer using the waterways as his hunting ground? Now that we've reached the end of the trail, it's time to step back, review the evidence, and ask what is the truth. Let's rewind the tapes. We began with bodies, dozens of them, recovered from canals that curve like black ribbons through Manchester's heart. Victims like Nathan Tomlinson, Shovik Pal, David Plunkett, and Luca Guerra. All young, all fit, all last seen alive in public, all allegedly drunk. Yet, many didn't seem impaired at all in CCTV footage. Again and again, the pattern re-emerged. Night out, last seen alone, near a canal, missing, found dead days later. Each one, individually, might be an accident, but together, they form a trail. And at the end of that trail, silence. Officially, police have denied any connection, dismissed talk of foul play, declared it nothing more than tragic coincidence. But as we've uncovered, that silence speaks volumes. The evidence we can't ignore. Let's list the facts, cold and clear. Over 60 deaths in 2 decades, many with near-identical circumstances. Multiple survivors who report being chased or pushed near the canal. CCTV footage either missing, obscured, or inexplicably incomplete. Final phone calls capturing panic, screaming, and chilling silence. Bodies found with injuries, missing belongings, or no signs of drowning despite being pulled from water. Victims with no prior mental health issues, no signs of suicidal ideation. And perhaps most damning, An utter lack of curiosity from authorities. That last one is key. When a system stops asking questions, it becomes part of the problem. Theories at war. Over the years, multiple explanations have been proposed. Let's weigh them. 1. Accidental drownings. The official theory. Men, often intoxicated, slip and fall into the canals. Poor lighting. Slippery edges. Alcohol. Simple as that. And yes, this can and does happen. But 60 times? To similar profiles? In the same areas? The math doesn't feel right. 2. The Canal Pusher, a serial killer. A lone predator. Maybe more than one. Targeting drunk, isolated men. Waiting in the shadows. Pushing. Vanishing. It explains the consistency. The CCTV gaps. The survivor stories. But we lack one crucial thing, a suspect. No footage. No eyewitness. No confession. Only smoke. No confirmed fire. Still, it feels real. 3. A network or copycats. Some believe it's not a single person, but a network. Multiple people, acting independently or together. Dark web forums, sadistic games, rituals, psychological thrill seekers. It sounds like fiction until you realize how many serial killer networks have been uncovered after years of denial. The smiley face killer theory in the US comes to mind. 4. Cover-up or institutional blindness. Maybe the scariest theory of all, that the truth is known but hidden, to protect reputations, budgets, economies, institutions, that the Canal Pusher isn't just one person, but a system that refuses to see. What the families say. In the fog of mystery, one thing remains heartbreakingly clear. The grief. Mothers, fathers, sisters, friends, all left with a hollow space where answers should be. They ask for investigations, for reviews, for inquests, and time after time they are told, no foul play. Case closed. But the evidence doesn't close. It lingers, twists, festers. Many families now believe their loved ones were murdered. Some are even funding private investigations, hiring forensic specialists, running public campaigns. Because if the system won't fight for truth, they will. And that truth still waits beneath the surface. The power of the internet. If there's one force the Canal Pusher didn't anticipate, it's the digital age. Social media brought this theory back to life. Reddit users cross-referenced disappearances. TikTok creators made viral videos tracking victims' last known locations. YouTube documentaries like this one began connecting the dots. And in the comment sections, a community formed. Skeptics, survivors, family members, amateur sleuths, all asking the same question. Why isn't anyone doing anything? Because online the silence breaks. And that's when things change. So, is the Canal Pusher real? We may never have a definitive answer. But let's ask a different question. Do enough signs point to something dangerous? Absolutely. Too many deaths. Too many patterns. Too many people warning us. Whether it's a serial killer, a group, or a fatal combination of negligence and geography, the result is the same. People are dying, and no one is stopping it. That's real. That's fact. And that's what matters. What needs to happen now? This isn't just a story to forget. It's a call to action. If Manchester wants to protect its citizens, then certain steps are non-negotiable. Reopen suspicious cases. Conduct independent autopsies. Fund an external inquiry. Improve canal-side lighting and safety. Require better CCTV coverage along high-risk paths. Take survivor testimonies seriously. Acknowledge the pattern. Because if we keep ignoring the clues, the deaths won't stop. They'll just keep happening out of sight beneath the surface behind the next corner. And one day, it could be someone you know. The final scene. Picture this. It's 2:37 a.m. The city is silent, save for the low hum of distant music and the occasional clack of high heels on pavement. A young man stumbles slightly, but isn't drunk, just tired. Alone. Phone dying. He cuts down a shortcut by the Rochdale Canal. He doesn't know someone's watching. A shadow moves behind him. No sound. No warning. Just a sudden shove. A splash. Silence. Another headline in the morning. Young man found dead in canal. No suspicious circumstances. Case closed. But we remember. We've seen the pattern. We've asked the hard questions. And maybe, just maybe, someone watching this will be the one who finally sees the truth. Who connects the final dot? Who pulls the killer out of the shadows? Until then, stay vigilant, stay curious, and don't walk near the canal alone. Because if the Canal Pusher is real, they're still out there, and they're waiting. The waters of Manchester's canals remain still, but the questions, they ripple through every corner of this city. Over 60 lives gone, and still no answers, no arrests, no justice. Was it all coincidence? Or is there something darker lurking just beneath the surface? We may never know for certain. But one thing is clear. If there's a killer out there, still walking those canal paths, then staying silent, is not an option. Man Detective, what do you think? Is the Canal Pusher real? Or is this all an eerie series of tragedies waiting to be explained? Drop your theory in the comments below. Let's open this investigation together. I'm a Black Speech Bubble. If you found this case compelling, like the video, subscribe for more unsolved mysteries, and share it with someone who needs to know the truth. Because the more eyes on this story, the harder it becomes to ignore. Until next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and whatever you do, don't walk alone by the canal.